We wait now for the national flag to be dropped for this 45-lap encounter. The weather, the big question mark. National flag up and down. A great start from Tony Longhurst. John Bow, his customary bad start. Dick Johnson, a good start, switches to the inside. Johnson, the leader from Longhurst, then Bow. Andrew Madecki in fourth. Allan Moffat, a very bad start in the Eggenberger-built ANZ Ford Sierra. A welcome return to Touring Car Championship racing after 4 years away. And it's Dick Johnson who leads the pack through the sweeping left-hander at NEC. Johnson with one car length in hand from Tony Longhurst, then John Bow, Andrew Madecki, Larry Perkins and Jim Richards. A great start in the mobile BMW. Down towards this descending right-hander. A track that can catch a lot of drivers out. If you go wide and end up in the dust and the sand, you'll stay there for the remainder of the race, and that's something that they're all mindful of. Dick Johnson, the leader. John Bow now moves up into second place on the opening lap, the first of 45. Tony Longhurst in third, Andrew Madecki in fourth in the Oxo car, then Larry Perkins. Jim Richards behind, Colin Bond, then Peter Brock. He's just in front of old teammate Allan Moffat as the field completes lap 1 of 45. 2.41 kilometres, the Wanneroo Park layout. And some very interesting goings on in practice. Tony Noski there in the Kalari entry. Lap record held by George Fury, a time of 62.44 seconds, and Johnson's time yesterday in qualifying in the second session was a stunning 59.32. John Bow only 6/100ths of a second behind, and Allan Moffat incidentally in 9th position. Peter McKay, this is another great start by the Shell team. Shades of the first 2 rounds.
They've just been unbelievable this year. Their consistency, their speed. Nobody has gotten within cooey of them.
Andrew Madecki now to third position by 1 car length. Managed to get underneath Tony Longhurst through the right-hander. Park Royal sweeper, a very difficult part of the course. Then they come down this long straight under brakes to the right-hander. Notice a new patch of road there this year, so the cars get very wide before they come down the pit straight, right in front of our commentary point. Lap 2 completed of 45. Dick Johnson the leader, John Bow in second. Third place is Andrew Madecki from Port Macquarie in the Oxo Ford Sierra. Fourth, Tony Longhurst in the Freeport entry.
Larry Perkins bringing up 5th spot, and Jim Richards also a good effort by him to get up to 6th at this stage ahead of Colin Bond.
The gap from Johnson to Madecki, 2.25 seconds. Andrew was very pleased with his practice performance yesterday. Broke an axle on Friday, missed the opening round of official qualifying yesterday morning, or indeed at midday yesterday Western time, but said that he was very pleased this morning to be within 5/10ths of John Bow and Dick Johnson after qualifying, the closest he'd been in the first 3 rounds. Bow opting for a wide line as he comes down to the right-hander.
I think Madecki gave Johnson and Bow a bit of a fright when he came out in the second session yesterday, because they were pretty confident with the times that they had posted. They were well clear of the rest of the field, and then Madecki, having missed the session, as Neil Crompton said, came out and just went flat and reeled off a lightning lap.
What is interesting this weekend is the closeness of all the cars. For example, the cars in positions 5 through 10 were separated by only 5/10ths of a second. They included Larry Perkins, Allan Moffat, Colin Bond, Jim Richards and Peter Brock. And in fact, Jim Richards at the moment is right behind Larry Perkins. There's some 7 or 8 seconds behind these two, and Richards is in front of Colin Bond and Allan Moffat with Peter Brock behind. Still, as we look down towards the east, Peter McLeod locks a brake. There's John Farrell in the 52 Mobile Statewide Oils entry. McLeod and the Petratech Commodore travelling all the way from Shell Harbour. As we look east, it still looks to me as though we might be in for just a spot of rain. And if that happens, it'll make this race very interesting. There's Longhurst in fourth. You may see in the background this scrap for the minor placings at the moment. Quite a few cars involved. You'll see in the background Larry Perkins defending quite vigorously from Jim Richards. Then Colin Bond, then Allan Moffat, and then Peter Brock, tail end Charlie of this bunch. Perkins, you'll notice, still driving the VL Commodore, the car that's been run in Australia now for almost the last 18 months. Was to have run his new car next weekend in Adelaide, but they're still waiting the official homologation of that car. We may now see that for Lakeside if all 500 of the new Group A SS Holden Commodores can be built. Spots of rain on the lens of the camera. I noticed that time at the bottom end of the circuit will come. That's going to make this race very interesting.
Race leader Dick Johnson lapping at just a touch over the 60-second mark, 60.5. Fastest lap on is in fact though belong to John Bow, even though he's in second place. Just put in one quick lap then. Shade faster than Dick. They're not getting too far away. Here's Perkins still under strong challenge from Jim Richards, and they're closing up behind Allan Moffat with a slower car sandwiched in between them. Colin Bond there as well.
Larry Perkins 8.96 seconds behind Dick Johnson. This is a great performance from Jim Richards in the mobile BMW M3. He's got Colin Bond on the inside though, who wants to move up a slot. These cars, the M3s that is, almost a second quicker than they were here this time last year, and continued development going into the Bridgestone tyres on the car. Netcom been helping with the computer programming of the engine management system, and the cars are working quite well. 2.3 litre, 4-cylinder double overhead cam, 16 valve engine versus the 2 litre turbocharged Ford Sierra, twin cam and 16 valves again. In terms of horsepower, no comparison, but their power to weight ratio certainly suggests that the Sierra is the car that's got the score on the board.
And this is where the dice is at the moment. Commodore, BMW and Sierra in that order. Bond pulls out, tries to get inside Jim Richards as they go into the corner, and does so. Richards forced out wide. But he comes out in front regardless.
There was a suggestion earlier in the week that the drivers had to stay on the inside of that white line, as Colin Bond now finds that gap that he's been probing for. These two have had a great scrap in the third round of the Touring Car Championship at Winton Raceway, and indeed in the opening round of the AMSCAR Series, and continues today for round 4 at Wanneroo.
Now Moffat tags onto the tail of Jim Richards, so this scrap is not over yet, not by a long chalk, although the battle between these three has allowed Larry Perkins to get away just a little in front of them.
Andrew Bagnall, the other white Ford Sierra, mixed up in that bunch, in the second of the OXO cars.
He's down a lap.
Just checking the gap from race leader Dick Johnson back to Colin Bond.
Colin Bond in second place in the overall championship, with 2 third-placed finishes and a second-place finish so far.
It's about 12 seconds back to this group of cars, really embroiled in quite a battle. Larry and Colin have now opened up on Jim Richards as we go back to our leader Dick Johnson. As Gary said before, lapping in times around the low 60-second mark. Which is not bad considering the car was coping with fairly heavy fuel loads, and to begin with certainly quite cool tyres. They're up to temperature now, no doubt about that.
Over the top of the hill, Johnson and Bow ahead of Andrew Madecki. Here's the scrap continuing between Colin Bond and Larry Perkins. Bond has him as they go through the corner. Yes, he does. And there's Allan Moffat has slipped past Jim Richards as well. So there's been quite a change in order there. They get pretty close as they swing back onto the main straight. The leading quartet untouched by this battle at the moment, doing it quite nicely in front.
Really the charger in the field at the moment in the Caltex entry. Got past Jim, now past Larry.
Yeah, he's up to 5th place.
Yep. It's not a bad performance with, let me see, 9 laps down. 9 laps down in about 2 seconds for Dick Johnson. Crompton preempting slightly. And out of this 45-lap race, he still stands to be a man with plenty to gain. Allan Moffat makes a move on Larry Perkins and gets away with it. So Moffat up to 6th, or is he? Because Larry Perkins has the benefit of the run to the inside for this next crucial corner beneath our speed cam in the pit straight. Yes, and Perkins gets back with the advantage of being a little tighter. So Moffat has to do all that work all over again.
Well, he hasn't done such a bad job, all things considered, having blown the start quite badly. and now involved in this battle here with Larry Perkins. But still a lot of hard work to do for him if he's going to mount any kind of a challenge on the leading division in the race.
Yeah, and still it's getting darker and darker here. Dick Johnson leading from John Bow. Two short cars on screen, nothing separating them. Andrew Madecki in third, Tony Longhurst in fourth, Colin Bond closing the gap a little in fifth and charging through the field after a fairly slow start.
Down comes the rain as we return to Wanneroo, and Jim Richards spinning out as he goes through the bottom corner in car number 1, the Mobile BMW. Goodness me, the action's coming thick and fast here. Now the track is as slick as anything. It's really pouring down here.
Not just pouring, it's torrential. Goodness me, Allan Moffat spears off the road, highlighting once again why on earth are people standing by the side of the racetrack. Goodness me.
Well, Moffat had just passed in the previous lap Larry Perkins and was making such a good run. Goodness me, there's Jim Richards again.
They'll have to come in for wets. Perkins has come to the pits. If he can get wet tyres on, Tony Noski is off in the Kalari entry. Andrew Bagnall has come in. Longhurst has spun his car. Mayhem at Wanneroo.
Oh, look at this.
It is absolutely teeming rain as Peter McLeod sprint cars his way onto the pit straight. Oh! Off go the two
leaders. Goodness me, Johnson and Bow both off. Can they recover? Yes, Bow can.
They go straight to the pits. They've got to go to the pits.
Must do. Murray Carter as well.
It even suggests they may
Andrew Madecki. Carter's staying out there.
Okay, Perkins has gone back out of pits. Look at, that's Murray Carter trying to drive in a straight line. There's so much water on the road, it's an impossible task. The crowd can't believe it. We can't believe it. Okay, so Dick Johnson for full wets. Now, the difficult thing here is I can still see sunshine in the background. It's very likely that they may have to make another rubber change before the end of this race as Colin Bond goes off on the Caltex Ford Sierra at the bottom of the straight. There must be something on the track there other than just water, that these guys are too experienced. And someone else joins him as well. In fact, it's Longhurst.
Nudge the fence, Longhurst as well. They're having a hell of a time getting out of this position.
Total ridiculous mayhem. John Bow to the pits. We need about 338 cameras to cover all this.
It's all happening so fast. The rain broke and came down in torrents, almost, well, not without warning, because we did mention several times.
Red flag is out.
Race has stopped. Race has been halted.
Well, that was, I'd say, a pretty sensible decision by the clerk, of course. There's Outrageous things going on all around the course. It's dangerous for all competitors, all spectators and officials. And the Confederation and the clerk, of course, have done the right thing.
Goodness gracious me.
Gerald Kay trying to figure out which way is up. Larry Perkins spots the red flag. I've never seen anything like this in my entire motor racing life. It all happened on lap 15 of 45, round 4 of the Shell Ultra Australian Touring Car Championship.
Things were going so well for Dick Johnson and John Bowe at the head of the field.
As we went to the break, we had Dick and John leading.
And sunshine.
Yeah, perfect sunshine. We gave you 3 minutes to go away and have a cup of tea, and we've served up the greatest amount of mayhem you could possibly have.
That was just unbelievable. You're right about the track. There must have been something else out there, because
those guys don't make those mistakes.
No, and they were going off every which way.
You know, even though it was knee-deep in water there at one stage in pit straight, Allan Moffat's stricken ANZ Ford Sierra, not a good way to come back to business.
Well, let's just take a look at part of the action again. These were the race leaders, Dick Johnson and, here's car number 12 going off. That's Peter McLeod. It really happened so fast. We were hard put. Here we are. Here are the race leaders. Dick Johnson, John Bowe, the pair of them. And they were fortunate that they managed to escape the deeper part of the sand trap there.
How lucky was John Bowe? He just gassed it up and said, I've got to get out of here. Details on the NEC replay as Jim Richards' car is being towed out of the sand. Plenty of it here in Western Australia. Goodness me. So, as I said before, Dick was leading as Murray Carter tries to dig the Nedcom entry out of the sand. We had John Bowe second. We had Andrew Radecki in third. Tony Longhurst was fourth. Colin Bond was fifth. Lap 15 of 45. The rain came down and the place became a complete nightmare. In fact, John Farrell's car, which had pulled to the infield a lap earlier, has probably been the luckiest break of his life. There's John Bowe. His youngsters, his twins, in fact, turning 6 today. They probably aren't too impressed in Tasmania at the moment watching Dad sit in the pits.
Yeah, I had a fleeting glimpse of him waving a birthday card out the window just prior to the start of the race. Well, they'll be happy at least that he survived that little spin-off in the wet. And they're all back in the pits now, assessing what damage, if any, has been done. And
I'll notice that
changing to wet weather tyres now that it's stopped raining and the sun is coming out, getting ready for a restart. Well, let's get down to Peter McKay, who's in the pit area. We can find out what's happened, what they're going to do about the restart, what race distance it's going to be when they restart.
Well, pit lane, as you can see, is very, very busy at the moment, with every car in the Touring Car Championship field in for wet weather rubber for what might be a complete restart. I think we'll just go across and have a chat with John Bowe, who might throw some light on what sent all the cars off in the first corner. John, what was it out there? Just a rivulet of rain?
Well, Peter, it started raining, and while the tyres are hot, you've got some semblance of grip, but as soon as the tyres cool down, I mean, it's just like driving on ice or something. I turned the steering wheel doing about 10 mile an hour and just went straight ahead. I couldn't believe it.
Well, what the problem is now, of course, is the sun's out. So you guys are putting on wet weather rubber, but in all likelihood, it'll be a track suitable for slick tyres in, what, 10 or 15 minutes?
Well, probably so, yeah. Everybody makes jokes about Tasmanian weather, but this Western Australian stuff's not that flash, is it?
No, you're right there. Neil.
Peter McKay with boys down in pit lane all scratching their heads saying, what on earth has happened?
Well, they're looking at a restart, I understand, in about 10 minutes from now, but what duration, what length the race will be in the restart remains to be seen.
How good are you at tap dancing?
Well, it's not a question of tap dancing, and what I'm concerned about is the fact that we're off air in 37 minutes from now. Where does that leave us in the middle of the race?
Stand by for the world's biggest stretch.
Well, it's
the Golson BMW, the 635. Oh dear, I can't believe this. Allan Moffat's car is out of the sand, so if there is a restart and all is well, then I presume that he can carry on with the job,
well,
whatever the job may be.
Yeah, I don't think he'd have done much damage there, although it was more spectacular.
But there had to be, just going back to what was going on at the bottom of the straight, it's certainly a very quick part of the course, but
the rain didn't explain what happened.
Those guys don't make those sort of mistakes, not one after the other, lap after lap, and there were people spearing off everywhere because there's been a number of other preliminary races here earlier today, and there could have been little oil or perhaps a rubber build up on the course there, but whatever, it's certainly been quite dramatic.
Well, here we are. We're at a hold at Wanneroo in West Australia, the 4th round of the Australian Touring Car Championship, after 15 laps being called to a halt after torrential rain poured on the track and drivers went slip sliding everywhere. They're in the pits getting checked out and getting reshod at the moment. There will be a restart when we return to Wanneroo. Well, if you've just joined us on the Australian Television Network for coverage of round 4 of the Shell Ultra Australian Touring Car Championship from Wanneroo, this is the sorry sight that greets you in the pit lane. The race was 15 laps old when the downpour came and everybody just went slip sliding away. The race was stopped, and we're awaiting now information from the stewards and CAMS officials regarding a restart. There will be a restart in a moment. When I say a few moments, and when they get themselves sorted out. Meantime, Peter McKay down in the pit area with some further information for us.
Well, chaos and indecision reigns in pit lane here at Wanneroo. Peter, what are you going to do? The sun's coming out. You've got the choice of slicks and wet weather rubber, of course.
Slicks.
Back to slicks.
Slicks. Slicks. I'm a slick man from way back. Although I must admit that I was faltering a little bit there on that lap before they came into the pits. I was in first gear doing probably 40k, I guess, and the car was totally out of control. I was just happy to sort of get back to the pits. Yeah, I think it's going to turn into slicks. It's you can zig when you should zag around here, of course, with that sort of weather. It's a bit like in Queensland, I guess. But at the moment, it's definitely a set of soft slicks, and get out there and go.
Well, the problem is, of course, it may rain a little later.
Yes, well, you're forced, I think, still to get that dry line, get the slicks, get some heat to the temperature into the tyres, and then try and hang out there. Just then, it was just that little bit too heavy for slicks. Well, quite a bit too heavy for slicks, I guess.
OK, can you work that out? We've stopped the race because it's raining and all the cars are on slick tyres, so we have a quarter of an hour break, and now they're going to go out and restart the race on slick tyres.
Gives us time to get ourselves confused, Pete.
And don't you love Rocky's new hat, Neil?
Astro Boy. That's the new nickname for Mr. Brock.
All right, let's just recap again for you. Dick Johnson was the race leader at the time the red flag went. Well, actually, he wasn't the race leader when the red flag went out because he'd spun off, hadn't he?
Don't confuse
me. Dick Johnson was leading after 15 laps from John Bowe, followed by Andrew Madecki, Tony Longhurst, Colin Bond, then Larry Perkins and Allan Moffat. And then, as we said, the rain came down and mayhem followed. There's Larry Perkins' car. Larry's one of those people that got it into the pits unscathed, Neil.
Yeah, Larry did a good job, and he was just literally cruising around when the red flag finally came out. And of course, the difficult thing now is to try and work out what the right way is to go. There's going to be more rain, no doubt about that, but it'll be punctuated by some sunshine. And is this race going to be 5 laps, 10 laps, 15 laps? We don't know. We're still trying to determine that from the clerk of course and from the controlling body of motorsport in this country, the Confederation of Australian Motorsport, and they've got a big problem on their hands as well. I
still can't get over the sight of Murray Carter aquaplaning sideways down the main straight. Quite incredible. Larry Perkins, we just saw on screen, has now been joined by Peter McKay. Let's get back down there.
At lap 50. Gives me book back. Gives me bloody book.
There's a great argument going on here. We have Larry Perkins looking at his lap chart. We have John Large, the president of CAMS, in attendance. And there's some doubt as to whether the race should be a complete restart. Obviously, the CAMS thought is that it should, but Larry isn't quite so sure.
Well, my pit information says I completed my 14 laps, and the rules say, I'll read it, prior to the completion of 14 laps, the race may not be rerun. I mean, the race can't start from scratch again. It's quite clear, there it is. So, I mean, I don't want to sit here arguing. I'm trying to win a race, but I only hope they do follow the rules.
John Large, have you had a look at that?
Yes, the official position is that the red flag came out on lap 13, which means there will be a complete restart. I don't know whether Larry didn't see it till lap 14, but it came out on lap 13, for sure.
OK, that seems to be resolved. Back to you, Neil.
I don't know whether there's enough fingers and toes to count those laps.
Our lap scoring's fairly sharp up here. In fact, we had a CAMS delegate with us doing the lap scoring, and the numbers don't add up, I'm afraid, Mr. Large.
No, it was definitely lap 14.
Well, oh yeah.
Well, anyway, we're not going to win that argument, nor is Larry Perkins. It's going to be a complete restart which means that they will run 45 laps once they get up and running. And we should prepare you for the fact now that you're not going to see the conclusion of this race in our telecast time.
We'll beat out the result on our tom-toms.
Well, this is just an amazing, totally amazing situation, and even the drivers are nonplussed. Even they can't figure out exactly how all of this occurred. It wasn't just a question of wet weather and changing to slick tyres. Maybe the racing that the track had earlier in the day, there was a lot of build-up of grease deposits, some oil maybe, but the way they went off the track when the rain came down, and it was very heavy, there's no doubt about that, and on slick tyres it would have been difficult under normal circumstances. But one of the wise men of motorsport who knows all things, at least that's what he tells us, is Frank Gardner. He's about to impart some more of his wisdom to Peter McKay.
Well, I've just walked down to the other end of pit lane, and Tony Longhurst's Ford Sierra seems to be wearing wet weather tyres, Frank Gardner.
Well, it's so slippery out there, you just can't jeopardise the car. It's one of the slipperiest circuits for wet weather conditions. It's not the way to go, but you can't jeopardise your car.
So the chance, yes, and we as the Palmer Tube Mills shell cars go behind us, Frank has pointed out that they too have wet weather tyres. The problem though is...
We're going to lose time on it. We're going to lose time on a pit stop enormously, and we're going to have to make a pit stop. But in between time, you might not be around for the pit stop because you could lose a car out there. It's a very quick circuit, a lot of fast corners, and they stopped it wisely before somebody got hurt. Now they're restarting because we've regrouped, got wet tyres on, but it is a very slippery circuit, so it'll be quite interesting on who does what with what now.
So, Neil Crompton, we've had plenty of drama so far, but it looks as if the dramas are not quite over.
Peter McKay talking there with Frank Gardner. A very interesting situation, one that we're looking forward to some result to. We'll be back after this break to try and answer some of the questions. There's plenty of them.
Welcome back to wonderful Wanneroo, where we're getting set for a restart in round 4 of the Australian Touring Car Championship. The previous 13, 14 or 15 laps, depending on your lap scoring, have been wiped off the books altogether after all those amazing incidents, and it will be a complete new race over 45 laps. The previous encounter will count for nothing. However, what that means, of course, is that, as I've indicated previously, we are certainly not going to see the conclusion of the race within our telecast time, which runs out in about 20 minutes from now. Now, for Sydney viewers and New South Wales viewers, we will be replaying this race in full tonight after the movie instead of Falcon Crest. Sorry about that if you're a Falcon Crest fan, but after the movie in Sydney tonight, you will be seeing a replay of this round of the Touring Car Championship. All other states, do not despair. We're endeavouring to make the best arrangements possible at this moment, and as soon as we've got it all nailed down, we'll let you know what the situation is there regarding replays in other states. But for Sydney, replay after the movie tonight. Okay, let's wipe the slate clean and get started once more. Off on a warm-up lap or two.
Well, I don't know, there's even an argument about that down there at the moment. Frank Gardner discussing life with the President of the Confederation of Australian Motorsport, Mr. John Large. Some guys then weren't sure whether they get one warm-up lap or two. Some guys sat on the grid and then everybody was flagged away. Fair to say there aren't too many people here at the moment who know much about what's going on. Dick Johnson has come back into the pits. He's probably made an assessment of the road and will now make a judgment on rubber. But very confusing situation.
Yeah, the jacks are up under Johnson's car.
Yeah, well, John Bowe goes out on his second warm-up lap. Won't be a lot of warmth out there at the moment. So what is Dick doing? Is he going back to slicks, or are they just lightly grooved intermediates?
I think they might be intermediates, Neil.
Yeah.
The wet weather tyres are definitely off, and I think I did get a good look at the tyre as they put it on, but I think it's an intermediate.
The track is very, very wet. It would take a long time to develop a dry line. There's still no guarantee that the rain is gone. So I'd like to be able to see what they were. I think they were intermediates. I thought I could pick up a groove. Gerald Kay, John Smith, the hot shot of the under 2 litre class. One of the interesting things about this weekend at the completion of the 4th round of the championship, there's a very substantial divvy up of prize money. In fact, I think it's $30,000 in all, divided equally between the entrants of the cars which have participated in each of the first 4 rounds: Calder, Simmons, Winton and Wanneroo.
Yes, but after today's events, don't you think there might be a little bit tough talking at the carve-up barbecue tonight?
Yes, indeed. But what you said before is exactly right, Gary. It's a case of forgetting about
Wipe the slate.
Yeah. Bulk erase that. This is welcome back to Wanneroo. We're starting round 4 of the Touring Car Championship with no knowledge of what happened before. Maybe somebody can descend the cone of silence on all this.
Colin Bond just in there behind Larry Perkins. They come back to regrid to start all over again. Allan Moffat has been in behind the pits and got his car cleaned up and back to the action. Colin Bond was one of the more spectacular exits from the original start to the race when the wet weather descended. And I tell you what, if they're going to give an award for the most spectacular exit, they're going to have to...
Andrew Badecki has just made a spectacular exit into the pit road. He's decided to change rubber. Sorry to interrupt there, Gary.
Well, as I said, they're going to have to look at these replays a few times to see who gets the most spectacular award, but Colin Bond certainly will be a contender.
NEC replay shows just how slippery it was.
And Tony Longhurst joined him not long after.
That was in the previous race of somewhere between 12, 13, 14, 15 laps, depending on who you listen to.
Bonnet's up on Madecki's car. It's not a change of tyres. He'll be pretty disappointed the way things are panning out. A couple of holes in the grid, but let's take a look at it as they line up for this restart round for the Touring Car Championship. Dick Johnson on pole in the Shell Ultra Ford Sierra ahead of teammate John Bowe in car number 18. Andrew Madecki's supposed to fill the next spot, but he's sitting in the pits at the moment with the bonnet up. Then Tony Longhurst in the Freeport Ford Sierra, 5th spot, held down by Larry Perkins, the first to break the Ford domination. Allan Moffat, however, back in the ANZ banking Ford Sierra. Colin Bond also in the Caltex Sierra. Jim Richards in the Mobile BMW occupies position 8. Then Peter Brock and Andrew Bagnall in the second OXO team car. Over the top 10 positions.
The national flag goes up just as Andrew Badecki drives out of pit lane to join the field, so he's 1 lap down as the field gets away. Tony Longhurst made a good jump, so did Larry Perkins. In fact, most of the Sierras getting away pretty cleanly considering how fast and hard those turbos come on. John Bowe the leader to the first turn. Dick Johnson to second. You can see just how wet it is out there. Bowe, Johnson, Perkins, Moffat lurking there in 4th or 5th. Moffat drops back quickly though. It's Longhurst in 4th, then Richards, Bond, then followed by Peter Brock, Allan Moffat. Oh, look at John's car sliding everywhere. Great start though from Larry Perkins, who put power to the ground on a very greasy road quite quickly. There's quite large puddles at the bottom of the circuit down there. This is the restart, a fresh race, 45 laps the duration, round 4 of the Touring Car Championship. Cars spearing all over the place. Peter Brock assaulting Colin Bond at the moment as they come down this very fast back straight. John Bowe coming through to complete lap 1 of 45 with a very, very healthy lead over his team leader.
Oh, very twitchy there.
2:29 seconds. Then Perkins, Longhurst, Jim Richards, Colin Bond, Peter Brock, Andrew Bagnall, the next man through, Andrew Badecki, Allan Moffat, Tony Noski, Murray Carter and John Smith. This is the scrap for 4th place. Longhurst, car number 3, just ahead at the moment of Jim Richards. It's slippery out there.
Yeah, it's going to take a while too, as I said, for them to establish a decent dry line. Until that happens, it's going to be a bit hairy still.
I'll tell you what, I was impressed with the way that John Bowe started. Got away very quickly and is increasing his lead at the moment over Dick Johnson, just out to 3 seconds now. 3rd, 4th and 5th we're looking at now.
Yes, Bowe has been in the notoriously slow in the starts for the previous rounds of the Shell Touring Car Championship. But taking advantage of the circumstances here, he's got away like grease lightning. Perkins trying to challenge on the outside.
Well, no, Longhurst going through
on the inside, rather.
And Jim wants a piece of that action. He goes underneath Larry Perkins, side by side as they go through the S's.
Short back and sides for Larry from both of them.
They go around this sweeping left-hander now. A very difficult part of the track over the top of Nissan Skyline, where the camber of the road changes. Already something of a dryish line starting to develop now. The cars will be getting just a little more grip. Those on wets will be channeling plenty of water out from under the car. Former teammates, JPS teammates, Tony Longhurst and Jim Richards, in vastly different motor vehicles this year. Jim Richards, always talked about as the Rainmaster, getting an opportunity now to really show his stuff. The yellow flag's being shown to the leaders at the moment. I can't see who's run off, but John Bowe certainly got a comfortable lead. That's the answer to that question. Andrew Bagnall was the man that went off. Still 3 seconds between the two Shell cars, and then this scrap for third. Tony Longhurst and Jim Richards. And they've now substantially dropped Larry Perkins off, who's falling into the clutches of Peter Brock. Some real pressure on Tony Longhurst. Not only does he have to control his own race, but he has to try and somehow defend from Jim Richards. A very difficult set of circumstances.
Here's Richards pushing hard too as they head out to the back of the course through the S's. They head up the hill once more. Richards really relishing the task here in the still wet conditions.
The BMW, in theory at least, should be a little easier to drive in these conditions. Power perhaps not as vicious as the Ford now. Jim just comfortably outbrakes Tony Longhurst, who gave him plenty of room. Jim has to keep it all cocked up sideways to come out the other side, but he makes it with an inch to spare. Now the power of the Ford Sierra will be evident. Jim can't do much about a car that's as quick as this, but what will happen at the bottom? No. The extra braking ability of the BMW comes in very handy. We're trying to guess at the moment as to who's gone out on what tyres, because the sun is now starting to peer out here, and the fellas who are on wet weather tyres, full wets particularly, are going to find themselves in a lot of strife, because those tyres will literally melt. Much softer compound than an ordinary slick racing tyre. Even the fellas on intermediates will find life pretty tough.
I think we might be seeing that now, Neil. Jim Richards and the BMW guys were going out on slick tyres, Brock and Richards, and Tony Longhurst, as Frank Gardner told us, was going to opt for the safety first way and go with a groove tyre. And perhaps already the heat's getting into that groove tyre. Certainly Tony's dropping a little off the pace.
Dick Johnson's narrowed the gap down to his teammate to just 1.3 seconds. So Jim Richards charging at the moment and has made the right decision. This is going to develop into just an absolute fascinating battle here on who's gone for what rubber. Third place Jim Richards rounding up Gerald Kay, then Longhurst, Madecki, Brock. Bagnall, remember, had a spin. I'm not sure where Andrew figures in the bunch at the moment either, because he went out, was a lap down. He's fifth, so that's a great charge through the field. Andrew Bagnall has come into the pit area, still got some problems with that car of his as we watch Jim Richards in the mobile BMW. You can see quite clearly on your screen that the track is definitely getting drier on the racing line. Mixed bag when you look at the horizon as Dick Johnson now goes down the inside of teammate John Bowe and assumes the rightful position of team leader and race leader as far as Dick's concerned anyway, and there's plenty of fans out in the crowd that agree with him, as you can hear.
A great sight for Neil Lowe, the team boss of the Shell team. Neil was saying that at Whitten he hoped for a big 1-2, a form finish. Of course, that all went to pieces on lap one when Larry and Dick had their contretemps, but today it's looking great.
So Dick Johnson leading away at the moment from John Bowe. Interesting scrap developing for third with Andrew Madecki starting to pressure Jim Richards. They're on their 7th lap of 45. And indeed, Andrew Madecki has now gone past Jim Richards for third place. Richards in fourth, and fifth is Tony Longhurst. That's the scrap for third and fourth.
I thought Madecki was a lap down.
Well, that's what I queried a moment ago, but our lap scorer David Hassel assures me that he's been on the charge and on the right rubber. He's been able to get back through the field.
Well, that's the most amazing short driving stint of all time.
Yes, I would have thought that Andrew would have been better off starting from pit lane, as they do in Formula One, rather than go around the track, lose, 2.41 kilometres and start dead last. But he certainly, in the heat of the moment, he elected to try to catch up the field.
Okay, so
Watching Richards.
In third spot, and we'll take it as red.
Larry Perkins to the pits. There he is, going back to what I guess would be full slick tyres. And is that Moffat who's come? No, it's not. It's Andrew Bagnall, sorry. Another of the White Sierras just coming into the pit lane. So the two mobile BMW cars fighting for their respective positions in the race. Some smoke, it looked like that time, coming out from underneath Brock's car, with Larry Perkins right behind it, getting very wide as he came off the top of Nissan Skyline, and then down to this really tricky part of the course at Park Royal. So Larry on the charge on the inside again. Jim Richards is called to the pits.
Rubber change again.
I thought you were telling me he was on slicks, McKay.
I can only go on what the boss told me.
So Tony Longhurst, as I can make it out at the moment, in third, then Brock in fourth, Colin Bond in fifth, Larry Perkins a lap down behind that bunch. But it's a furious battle. It's one heck of a battle. Tony Longhurst doing a great job. Brock giving it everything at the moment. So Brock through on the inside of Tony Longhurst. Colin Bond goes with him. So does Larry Perkins. Gee, he's having some trouble steering that car around in these conditions at the moment.
You would say that it's about now that Frank Gardner might call Tony into the pits to go over to slick tyres for the remainder of the race. Sky looks a little less threatening now. And there's a reasonable chance that no more rain will fall for the remainder of the race.
Well, there's so much in and out of the pits here, it's getting a little confusing, but there's no confusion up the front of the field. Of course, Dick Johnson leading from John Bower, and this man is in third spot. When I say this man, I'm talking about this man, 05, Peter Brock. Colin Bond tucked in behind him in fourth spot. Larry Perkins next is a lap down. So in actual fact, Tony Longhurst is in fifth place.
Bond on the outside, pretty difficult position to be in. It's still very, very slippery out there in a couple of spots. You'll notice the water just doesn't seem to be getting away. In fact, if anything, it seems to be worse down in that bottom part of the course. Now Colin Bond comes out again.
Well, we're on lap 15 of the race, and this is where it all fell apart last time round. Unfortunately, it's also where our telecast is going to fall apart, because we're off air very shortly. Unfortunately, we had no control over the weather or the fact that the race was going to be restarted. We apologise for the fact you're not going to see the finish of the race live here at this time, but repeating for Sydney viewers, a replay after the movie tonight, and for other stations in other states, we will advise you as soon as practicable about times for replays. Hope you've enjoyed what we've been able to present you. There's certainly been plenty of dramas from Wanneroo today. Hope you can join us from Adelaide next week for round 5 of the championship.
comes out of the pits, having made a lightning stop for what I presume was a tyre change. Tony Longhurst also ducked in as well. Peter Brock, meanwhile, has been rounded up by Larry Perkins, but remember that Larry is 1 lap down, having made a stop very early. So Colin Bond, I think, apart from Dick Johnson, who's running away quite nicely, Colin Bond is the one who would be in second place.
And if Dick goes in for a change of tyres, which is certainly on the cards, Colin, by deduction, would then take over the lead. And of course, the championship is very delicately poised at the moment, with Dick Johnson just 1 point up on Colin Bond.
I wonder whether the two shell cars went out on different rubber, which is why John got away so well in the opening 4 or 5 laps, drove away from Dick, then Dick started to catch him, and in fact John had to make a pit stop. It sort of suggests to me that maybe Dick had slicks on, therefore he may not need to stop now. I don't know, we can theorise for a long time, but certainly it was a disparity in the performance of both cars. So Johnson leading from Colin Bond in second, third Peter Brock in the 05 Mobile entry, and any man's guess as to where Jim Richards, Andrew Madecki and a couple of others are at the moment, having made stops.
And Longhurst has been in for his slicks.
And when you've got a $250,000 car, you can appreciate why Frank Gardner made the decision that he did. The information now is that Dick Johnson will make a stop. So Colin Bond is looking quite nice at the moment. He's about half a lap behind Dick Johnson. We're watching now going down to the right-hander at Park Royal. So that's the best part of a 30-odd second margin. It's not impossible to suggest that Dick could get into the pits quickly, change rubber and get out again. We'll see what happens.
Track quite dry there now, as you can see. Still wet in a few patches over the back of the course.
Running across it over the back.
Yeah.
So what is Dick doing? Is it a pit stop?
No, not this time round.
Try and get that gap between Dick and Colin Bond and see whether it's feasible for him to make the jump. I believe that John Bowers in 4th position, having made his stop. Then followed by Andrew Madecki in 5th, who's having problems with his car. He's pointing to the rear of it to his pit crew every time he goes by. They're all chasing this man. That's been the pattern this year. I think behind Andrew Madecki we have Jim Richards. They're the tyres waiting for Dick Johnson when he's ready. And that gap between Dick and Bondy is 32.2 seconds. It takes about 25 seconds of the red-hot stop to change all 4, but you've got to get in and out of the pits, so it's feasible to suggest that Bondy would go by.
Today we might see Dick Johnson fully extended in pursuit of Bond, if that's how it turns out.
Yes.
Well, a lot of people reckon that he hasn't been running to 100% potential yet. He's been foxing. Maybe that'd find him out, especially if he rejoined the race about 3 car lengths behind Bondy.
There's certainly no taking it away from the Shell team this season. Neil Lowe and the boys have done an absolutely impeccable job. The car has been on pole everywhere, and of course one of the cars has won every one of the preceding rounds.
Dick shooting for his 4th championship, but it's been a long time between drinks. It wasn't a happy time for him when he was running around in the Mustang. Has that car got a misfire, or are we hearing another car there? There was plenty of black smoke, weird things coming out of his car over the top that time. So the order at the moment, just to try and bring this all into perspective for you: Johnson the leader from Bond, Peter Brock in 3rd, John Bow in 4th, Andrew Madecki 5th, Jim Richards 6th, Larry Perkins 7th, and Tony Longhurst is 8th. We think.
After, what, 20 laps?
Yes. Johnson not going to the pits that time, still with about a 32-second gap over Colin Bond.
Hasn't been all plain sailing for the Johnson team this weekend. They've replaced a clutch in Dick's car and split 2 oil coolers over the weekend, and Neil Lowe very sensibly went to a different type of oil cooler in an effort to overcome that problem.
Somewhere in the background I keep hearing a Ford Sierra with a really bad misfire. I'll try and track it down, have a good listen to each of the cars as they go by.
Well, it's not Colin Bond. He just went by. He's in fine shape. Longhurst's car goes by. It's okay. Allan Moffat off the track and the car pushed behind the pits. I don't think we'll see a reappearance from him today. That's bad luck.
While Dick Johnson and John Bowe have certainly shown a clean pair of heels to the other Sierra teams so far this season, I guess we can expect the whole thing to concertina as some of the other cars get their act, or some of the other teams get their act together. If you look at the other Sierra rivals, Colin Bond has been operating on one engine, and he gets a second engine next weekend in Adelaide. And of course, that'll allow him to try things like turning up the boost and getting a little closer. Look at Andrew Madecki. He's struggled at times because of a lack of budget.
Talking about Andy, it's his car that's missing quite badly. Went past our commentary point that time in pit straight. The car sounded dreadful, and he keeps pointing towards the rear. I wonder whether or not the battery, for example, is mounted in the rear of that car and he's got a charge problem, or it's got an electrical problem. But anyway, we'll see. But he's certainly making his crew well aware of the fact that there is a problem with the car, and it sounds dreadful. There's Colin Bond in second place, still about 32 seconds down on Dick Johnson.
Joe Beninka, the team's engine man, back in Melbourne this weekend with the new engine on the dyno, and Colin tells me it's a development engine, should produce a little more horsepower, and we can expect him to be a little closer to the action. Whoa, as John Bowe's off.
And bad news for John. It looks like he may have bogged it. He's doing his best to get it out. No, he got it out. Good stuff. So he saved a bad situation as Andrew Madecki comes to the pits. And that's in a very funny spot on the track, just before they go to the top of Nissan Skyline in those S's, just opposite our commentary point. So Dick Johnson's put a lap on John Bowe. He went past. The word is that Dick Johnson will definitely make his stop on the next lap. So Colin Bond will, we think, go up to the lead, and Peter Brock might even have a taste of second. So what's Dick going to do? No. Still must be pretty happy with his lap times. He's not losing any ground. What a performance from Johnson so far in this championship. Pole position 4 times. Knocked out of business at Winton, but a win at Calder, a win at Simmons, and doing all the right things at the moment for a win here. Fairly ordinary season last year with the Ford Sierra before the cars really got to full tilt, and said before the Ford Mustang wasn't kind. It's been a long time since he's run so well in a touring car championship.
It's good to know the Johnson team, despite all the success, isn't complacent. Neil Lowe's off to Europe to check out developments on the European front, check out what the Eggenberger cars are up to. He's very aware that these other teams are getting their act together, and that things will get tougher as the season unfolds.
That's true. Here comes Johnson now into the pits for this long-awaited stop. We've been anticipating it for 3 or 4 laps now. Let's see how much time he takes to make the change. Away they go. The clock is running as they get to work on those central locking nuts. If they can get out in about 25 seconds, they won't be doing too badly, although Colin Bond is already about to go across the start-finish line and into the lead in the race. Johnson's still sitting in the pits. This is not going to be a lightning fast stop at all. Now they're set and away he goes. 25, well, it was a good stop, 25 seconds.
I think he's gone back out in third from what I can make out. The lead at the moment being held by Colin Bond in car 4. Second place car 05, Peter Brock. Third place car 17, Dick Johnson. And Niels Lottery for 4th and 5th. Are just working that out at the moment because it's a toss-up depending on the pit stops that were just made.
And the chase is on, 14.5 seconds from leader Colin Bond back to Dick Johnson. Johnson's got to run in these, get these tyres warmed up and bedded in. He's got to probably dump a lap and a half, and then he'll be going for it.
It'll be interesting to see just how long it takes him to reel in Colin Bond. He's looking a little lonely out there on the track at the moment, but that's because the competition is elsewhere. There are still plenty of contenders out there. This fourth round of the championship, in fact, remains wide open. Bond leading, Brock second, Johnson third, then Medecky, followed by Jim Richards, as best as we can sort it out at the moment.
Johnson certainly has the time to do it. Around about 20 laps to go. You only got to peg Bondy back by about a half a second a lap to do it. Actually, the maths are a little out there, perhaps 3/4 of a second a lap.
Gerald Kay in the background there, a couple of laps down, and not a real contender at this stage. Colin Bond, however, on the Castrol scoreboard is now the race leader. Peter Brock is in second place, Dick Johnson third, followed by Andrew Medecky and Jim Richards. It's a while since Colin Bond has found himself in front in a round of the Touring Car Championship. He'll be out to make the most of the fact.
And Johnson has already taken 3 seconds off Bondy's lead.
Catching up and getting past, though, are two different things.
We're on lap 27 of 45. And Colin Bond, the leader at the moment. Mr. Consistency in the Touring Car Championship so far. 2 third placings from the first 2 rounds, and then a second placing from Winton. Having won the opening round of the AMSCAR series at Wanneroo Park, he's about to round up Tony Noski in the Clary entry. VK Commodore. Colin Bond, 46 years of age, out of Sydney, driving a Sierra this year. Puts a big smile on his face. Winner of the Hardy Ferodo back in '69. An ace rally driver, 3 championships in total, 71, 2 and 4. He's won this Touring Car Championship, but it was 13 years ago. And he's currently second in the championship with 39 points, just 1 point behind the leader, Dick Johnson. Colin Bond only last week was down in Canberra tearing through the state forest there in a controlled rally sprint put on by Toyota. And amongst many of the senior motoring media, journalists and authorities, really demonstrated what great ability he had. The release that was taking place down there was for a new Toyota 4-wheel drive wagon, and Bondy went out and showed the fellas just what he could do in a forest. Quite sensational. Brilliant car control, demonstrating just how clever he is. So Colin Bond leading to try and get that gap back to Dick Johnson, who's certainly on the charge. Really having to fight, as Peter said before, the first time that we've had an opportunity to see Dick really extend this car and see what it's capable of. It's 8.39 seconds, that gap.
Colin Bond just rounding up car 27, the Ray Golson BMW with Toledo Tools backing. Of course, Stan Koff will be watching the telecast up there in Townsville. Oh, over the back of the course, somebody's gone off.
Tony Longhurst, big spin.
Oh, Bond safe still in the lead. There's Longhurst's car.
Something happened because it
was slowing, wasn't it?
It looked like something locked up, or you know, the car all of a sudden got out of Tony's control when it was doing almost 0 mile an hour. So I don't think it was a Longhurst fault. Something strange happened
broken.
to the car. Yep. Peter Brock in third position, chasing Dick Johnson and Colin Bond. And Andrew Medecky has called at the pits again, still with that misfire. In fact, both the Oxo cars are in the pit lane, and they would seem to be out of business. Get a time on Colin Bond and see just how quickly he's lapping. Remember, they qualified in 59s and 60s. Still about 9 seconds back to Dick Johnson. There's the Andrew Medecky car. Very disappointing for Andrew, who's putting a lot into his motorsport, self-financed in many instances, although he's got a lot of help from Oxo and from Park Royal and Castrol and other sponsors, but he still puts in a lot himself, and he's had a couple of really disappointing runs so far this year. 5th in the opening round at Calder, but then 2 did not finish results at Symmons Plains, Winton, and now potentially another one this weekend. And the smoke coming out of the back of the 05 car, in behind Gerald Kay at the moment. Peter Brock at the wheel.
And what we're seeing, I think, is a BMW in its ultimate trim. Brock got here of the West very early this week, and it's said he's done a lot of fiddling. He's very, very happy with the way the development has gone with the motor car. And he believes there's nothing much left in the BMW equation.
He reckons that was flat strap. The car recorded a time of 61.68 in qualifying. Compares with Jim's qualifying last year of a 62.04 and Tony is 62.32. So there's been a marginal improvement on the performance from last year. He shakes his head, just says, I'm doing everything I can, but that's not enough.
Yes, the car's beautifully geared here. He said it's just perfect going up the slide rise.
Well, it looks
through the
S's. I mean, it looks like it's balanced right. It's not sliding, it's not understeering. It's sort of all working right. He's braking nice and late. There's just not much else left. They really do need to tickle along with a little bit of extra horsepower. Mind you, last weekend, Roberto Ravatti won the second round of the European Touring Car Championship at Donington in England after the Eggenberger Fords dropped out with problems. And the new Nissan made its racing debut in the hands of Alan Grice and Wyn Percy. It had the lead up until 30 laps from the end of the race, and it too dropped out with a rear brake problem, giving a win to the BMW. There's Dick Johnson, race leader, car 17. No, in second place at the moment, still chasing. I'm sort of preempting things here at the moment. He seems to have stabilised around the 8-second mark. Just got it down on that lap, in fact, to 7 seconds. So he seemed to just hold station there for a couple of laps.
He's still got to do pick up at least half a second a lap from here to the finish, though, to make it interesting.
Bond's obviously got the message. Gerald Kay in trouble here on the pit straight, just in front of our commentary point.
Johnson, the hare. Certainly not chasing the tortoise, he's chasing Colin Bond. And it's now going to be a question of laps versus times to see how it pans out.
Okay, let's take a look at the Castrol scoreboard. Colin Bond is the leader, but only just at the moment from Dick Johnson. Third place is Peter Brock in the Mobil BMW. Fourth, Colin Bond. And fifth, Jimmy Richards in the Mobil BM. We're back in a moment. What did I say? Same name twice. Lap 33 at 45, Peter Brock in 05 Mobil car heading down towards Park Royal Corner and still in third place at the moment. Just ahead of John Bowe, who's starting to climb back up through the field. Larry Perkins has been working pretty hard to get back through and regain some lost territory. The odd puff of smoke coming out the back of the BMW.
There was a drama this morning during the warm-up, Neil. It did rain just as we saw in the earlier attempt to get this touring car race over and done with, and Brocky was caught out with some slick rubber and speared off into the sand pit, and there was a suggestion there was an oil leak created by that off, and the boys have been busy between that warm-up and the race pulling out the gearbox to get at that oil leak, so perhaps it's something that we can blame on that.
Colin Bond, race leader on screen, having just passed the Netcom entry driven by Murray Carter. I wonder what's going through Colin Bond's mind when they went out earlier today for a warm-up session. The Caltech Sierra just completely lost boost. They took it back in after lunch, did some work on it, and then asked permission from the clerk of course if they could go out before the touring car race and do a lap or two to get it sorted out, and that request was denied. So they had to go out there and practically run the car untested. 3.47
seconds between Colin Bond and Dick Johnson.
It's holding up all right, but will it continue to hold up as Dick Johnson gets on his tail?
Lap 35 of 45, 10 to go. The way the stopwatch is working at the moment, you'd see that Dick can do it, but as you said before, Gary, he's got to get by. That's another problem all over again. And Colin will be pretty keen to notch up a win in the Touring Car Championship. I can't think the last time that he had a win.
Well, the way things are going, I think Johnson's going to be right on his tailpipe with about 6 laps remaining, 5 laps remaining, and the last 5 laps here are going to be a ripper. There they are. That's the gap. Bond through the corner at the bottom. Johnson follows. And the gap is now 2.6 seconds. Coming down all the time. And this is where the battle is. In fact, this is the only battle left. And it's the big one. It's not only for victory in this 4th round of the championship, it is for outright lead in the championship itself. Johnson, the series leader at this point, but only by 1 point from Colin Bond. And victory for Bond today, of course, will give him the jump and his first victory of the season in the Touring Car Championship. Big effort. There he goes. The gap still 2.5 seconds. Brock not inside, but still holding down 3rd spot from Bow and Richards. The gap 1.6 seconds. So he made up a full second on that last lap, Dick Johnson. And within another lap, he is going to be sitting right on the tail of Colin Bond. The man who's won 2 out of 3 so far, was put out of business at Winton in the previous round. Bond, Johnson almost nose to tail now. Time running out. Johnson closing in for the kill.
Defensive line through that corner by Bond. He just moved over to cover his tracks.
He'll be doing a lot of looking in the rearview mirror from here to the finish. These are the top 2. Barring incident, you can all but forget about the rest. Brock, Bow, Richards battling it out for the minor position further back in the field.
And Bondi now maybe ruining the day lost in testing due to the air controller strike. He was forced to take a light plane from Sydney to Perth, an 11-hour trip.
That's a long haul.
Lost all of Thursday as here comes Johnson.
Johnson pulls out, coming down the straight to the bottom. He's got the inside line, he's got the run, he's got the lead.
And that was horsepower.
Has he? Bond's in the best spot to get back. Oh.
Well, you've got to admit that whatever it is he's got, Johnson's certainly got it this season in the Shell Sierra cars. It's been a dramatic race, a race full of incident, a race that had to be restarted, changes of tyre that allowed Bond in fact to go through to the lead while Johnson was in the pits. He emerged nearly 15 seconds in arrears, but has made up that time and regained the lead.
Fastest lap for Dick Johnson so far is 60.52. So the track getting back into the condition that he was used to in yesterday's qualifying, where he did a 59.
Well, if they were to finish in this order, it's going to stretch the lead just a little for Johnson at the top of the championship and put both he and Bond pretty well clear of the rest of the bunch.
Of course, Dick still has to be very cautious. There's lots of wet patches on the track and a metre or so offline, and we may see him do, we don't wish this will happen, we may see him do what other cars have done dozens of times today, and that's get out of shape. He's certainly doing everything beautifully and just can't take it away from the Johnson team. We tend to, we like to see our tall poppies run into trouble in Australia, but tall poppy Dick Johnson just can't be criticised this year.
they finish the way they are at the moment, Gary, Dick would have 60 points after 4 rounds in the championship. Colin Bond would be second with 54 points, and I'll work out the other minor placings, depending on, of course, the official lap scoring for some of the other minor runners in this race. The other thing that we haven't introduced into our commentary at all during the year is the fact that they must drop 1 round of this championship from their points tally as well. That's obviously your worst round.
Larry helped Dick do that at Winton.
So Dick's certainly done that. But, for example, Colin Bond hasn't really had a worst round so far, and that could prove costly in a funny kind of way at the end of the championship if he has to drop a bunch of points from a constant bunch of second or thirds or fourths.
Bit of change back in the field behind the leading pair. John Bauer has moved up once more to 3rd spot ahead of Peter Brock and Jim Richards. So with the laps running out, the pack coming through here. 4 laps remaining in the race as the leaders cross the start-finish line again. 4 laps remaining. There's Jim Richards going through. He's holding down 5th spot at the present time. A lap down on the race leader.
Well, watching this scrap between Peter McLeod and the Petratech Commodore and Andrew Bagnall in the Oxo Sierra. Bagnall's been to the pits a couple of times. The point situation in the championship, if they finish as they are now, would see Johnson with 60, Bond with 54, and John Bowe in 3rd with 47 points. This is quite a scrap between Bagnall and McLeod at the moment. Andrew's car should be a little better than the Commodore. So this is a great charge John Bowe, you know, to come back up through the field after that spin, Peter.
I think it'll be interesting to take a look at the individual lap times at the end of the day, because we all know how quick John Bowe is, and the Shell team crew chief Neil Lowe was telling me a little earlier that John has been a great asset to the team because of his ability to sort a motor car and to analyse it and to give the crew feedback. Dick says Neil is a very natural driver and tends to drive over any problem in the motor car, whereas perhaps because of his open wheeler background, John Bowe is terribly sensitive to a motor car's changes. Johnson heading, it seems, for yet another win, and he can be very proud of his Shell team, have not tasted defeat in 1988. And I suppose people might say that after the disaster of 1987, we should see Dick Johnson doing well. He's had a year to develop the motor car. He's assembled a great crew. Still pressing on very, very quickly as he heads into the last lap.
2.41 kilometres for Dick Johnson to run in this, the 4th round of the Shell Ultra Australian Touring Car Championship. Looking for win number 3 out of a possible 4. And in a little less than about 60 seconds, he'll pick up another 20 points to add to his championship tally, raising the total to 60 for outright lead by 6 points from Colin Bond, who will finish second in this race with 54, and John Bowe third with 47. In the NEC Car Star, Dick Johnson continues to lead with 36, 4 clear of Colin Bond with 32, and John Bowe will remain third in that championship as well with 19. So half a lap to go now for Dick Johnson in the Shell entry. What a great performance. Looked like he may have made the wrong decision in terms of tyres, but stuck to his guns, clawed his way back through the field, worked very hard. Peter said before, it's pretty hard to fault this guy or his team in 88. Great big slide from Dick Johnson. Out comes the checkered flag. Johnson, the winner of round 4. A fine performance and deserves the cheer from the crowd. Enormous gap, and there's a big cheer from the crowd. Enormous gap back to Colin Bond. It's probably out to the best part of 15 odd seconds now. And Colin Bond takes second placing now as Dick waves to the crowd. A huge crowd. John Bowe third place. By gee, he was charging. He wasn't too far from the back of Colin Bond, you know.